Howdy, it's tubalcain once again, and this time with video entitled What Makes It Work number 17, and the subject is the hydraulic jack and how it works. So here I have a couple examples of small hydraulic jacks, which are sometimes called bottle jacks, and I'm going to take one apart, show you how it works, and talk a little bit about it. A few things that you may or may not know about that. But first let me mention that as far as hydraulics is concerned, it's based on, well, many principles, but the two basic principles are that fluid is not compressible, and then also Pascal, who wrote many laws about this, stated that a pressure applied to any part of a confined liquid transmits to every other part with no loss. And furthermore, the original Greek meaning of hydraulics was that hydro was water and that allos meant pipe. So it was water in a pipe, but in our case it's going to be oil in a pipe. But in fact water would work, except that it has several disadvantages, and that is that it would freeze and it would rust, and it does not provide much lubrication, if any. So we really need some kind of hydraulic oil, and in this case we use jack oil, but transmission oil and various other kinds of hydraulic oils would work as well, and probably even just like a 30 weight or 20 weight motor oil. But we need to stick to what is recommended. And by the way, is this an old enough can of hydraulic oil? When's the last time they sold it in a can? Here's an older Monkey Ward's jack, 1.5 ton, and this is a more modern 2 ton. But all of these little jacks are built on the exact same principle and similar construction, but you're going to find some variations. For instance, the pump on this one is toward the back, whereas the pump on this one is off to the side, and I think you're going to see it off to the side on most of them now. And then they both have a little valve on the front. Also note that in the older products they still used a valve with a hole drilled in and a pin, and just think how expensive that was compared to just taking a part now and flattening it. And furthermore, the jack handles now do not have to have any kind of holes drilled in them. They just crimp them a little bit, so some genius in the engineering department got a nice bonus for that. But you're going to see changes like that. Also, in all the modern jacks you're going to see that the oil fill hole is just a rubber plug, and here in the older one it was still a threaded screw. Remember, if you're using a jack to jack up a car or something else heavy and you might be getting under there, that the jacks have a screw up here that allow you to raise the little pad here up a little bit higher and extend its reach. I prefer to put blocking underneath it. Never use a brick or a concrete block or something that is crushable. That is a no-no. Always use some kind of wood blocking, preferably some kind of hardwood, if you're going to raise it up, and a little bit broader, wider piece than this. So those are just a couple safety factors that you need to consider, because remember, all of that weight is borne by a column of oil. A little sissified jack like this comes in a plastic box now, something like this, I suppose, so you can put it under the Christmas tree instead of a necktie. And the handles are always in 2 pieces so that they can be packed and put into a smaller box, and that's no end of aggravation to real men. So if you have one of these, what you really have to do is weld that on, because it's just a nuisance. But the whole idea here is that you bring that up under your car or whatever you're going to lift, and most modern cars don't have any metal strong enough to support that. But you close the valve, and this is a valve, and then turn it around and use the big part here, and you're getting a lot of leverage here because this is at least a foot long. Let's measure it here. It's right about at a foot, so we'd call it a foot. And this, of course, is a second-class lever, if you remember 7th grade science. And a wheelbarrow is a second-class lever, if I remember correctly. So this is the pump with a, I guess you would call this the piston, and a little cylinder. And then there's a larger cylinder over here pushing on yet another piston, or what's sometimes called the ram, as that comes up. And there's a couple check valves in here, so there's actually 3 valves, two valves in here and then another valve here. But let's take another one apart that I'm going to sacrifice, similarly made, and is also a 2-ton jack. Here's the jack I'm going to sacrifice, and this is a $5 garage sale jack, and it was still in the box, and it probably had only been used once. I see a little bit of paint off the top here, but often people buy a jack and use it once for a specific job, and then they sell it at a garage sale. But it came in a little cardboard box, and the box was oil soaked, and it sat on my shelf, I'd say, for 15 or 20 years, and I didn't think much of it until I got it out the other day. And then I thought, well, the very first thing I need to do in taking this apart is to drain the oil out to minimize the mess. And in this case, there's just I told you, a little rubber button here, and they call it the oil refill button. And why they got that in large type, I don't know. They just don't get it sometimes. So I pulled this out and I drained the oil out, but that's all the oil that was in there, because it apparently had leaked out, probably been stored in the horizontal position for many years, and leaked out of wherever it could have, which is probably up here someplace. But anyway, that's all the oil in there that was in there. But I was shocked at how dirty the oil was, and that in fact there appears to be tadpoles swimming in there. And there was a lot of metallic particles, which means that at the factory they had not cleaned it very well anyway. Alright, let me take this apart here and show you the basic pieces. And I have had this apart before, because believe me, some of these parts are hard to get off. For instance, this had to be taken off with an impact wrench, because that's really tight. And there's one part that I still can't get off. So this top nut here is threaded on, as you can see. And then it'll just slide right off. And there is an O-ring in here. That's iron. It appears to be cast iron or malleable. Nicely made, actually. Now this part is the oil tank or the barrel, or different manufacturers call these by different names. But remember that this never has any pressure in it. It is just for the oil. In other words, it is a reservoir, if you will, for oil. And the oil is filled up to this level, never any higher. So you need that airspace up there, so don't lay it on its side and overfill it. Up to that level with hydraulic jack oil. And you probably never will have to add any more, but the oil in here is pumped out of here, down through this pump, and it comes out of these little holes here, down into the pump, and then it goes directly into the bottom of this cylinder here, and gets pumped up and pushes the ram up. Or the piston. I guess we could call this a piston, but they call it a ram. But essentially we have a cylinder and a piston. Now this is the only part I could not get off, and I spent over an hour on it. They really got that in there, and I used all my resources and knowledge from 50 years, and I still couldn't get it off. I know I could have got it off with a big pipe wrench, but it would have collapsed. I know it would have collapsed. I've had experience with this type of thing. And then this wouldn't move at all, because it wouldn't be round anymore. So I had to leave that in place. But pulling out the ram here, you'll see at the bottom that there is a rubber, actually it's not rubber, it's probably neoprene cup that does not let the oil pass this, and it gets pushed up. The oil pushes this up. And of course it's hollow for this screw. It's threaded right here for this Acme screw. And they did not bother to put a swivel up here. That is just all one piece. That should have a swivel like a C-clamp. Also down here at the base is a little bit of a gasket. I might have trouble getting that out. I don't really want to damage it in case I do put this back together. But there's a plastic gasket down there. I might pull that out later. Now as far as the pump here, we got linkage here that, again, that second class lever that gives us mechanical advantage. So we're getting mechanical advantage here on the lever, and then also all of the hydraulic advantage as well. So to take this off, I've already taken the little retainers off of these pins. And there's another one here. And then I can just lay that off to the side. And this is the pump. So that's the piston that's getting moved up and down, and it has about a 1-inch stroke. I'll measure that more accurately later on. Now if we take this out, you can see that there's the pump, and that is not a separate ball there. That's just the way they turned it, so that well, I don't know why they made that round actually. And there's an O-ring right here, a groove and an O-ring. And then down in the hole is a little valve body. I'm going to call it a valve body. And it just sits in there. So that, I thought that's pretty convenient the way that's designed, so it will pull out. But we have 2 ball check valves. And they just operate by gravity. There is no springs in there. And you can see that they are staked in place. Those balls are staked in place to make them captive. And the oil can enter around this groove. And when we pump down, the one ball will open, and then the other one closes so that the oil can't get back up. So we are pumping the oil down, and when it comes back up through the other check valve, it's drawing oil from these holes here out of the reservoir, unpressurized oil. And then when you go down again, the pressurized oil is going through one of the other holes and into the cylinder here. And that's all that there is to it. Now this little hole here, or this little screw, is nothing more than a plug, because they had to have some way of drilling holes. So they drilled the hole through here and threaded it, and then they put this plug in here so that nothing would leak, and that's tapered there, I think, to form a nice seal, because we don't want it to leak out of here. That has to be leak proof. And the bottom here, the base, appears to be cast iron and reasonably nicely made. Now anyone that has used one of these jacks know that you tighten up this valve screw here with the handle that I just showed you, so it's all the way in and it's pushing up against the little ball when you jack the jack up to raise it. And then when you want to release the pressure, and then the oil goes back into the reservoir here as unpressurized oil when you back this off. So really this only needs to have a movement of, oh my gosh, half a turn, maybe a full turn, not very much. That has a seal right there that seals around here, a packing, I guess you could call it. And then inside of here, still a little bit of oil, and there is the ball that gets pushed up into the seat. And then when you unscrew this, just the pressure moves the ball the other way. There is no spring, no need for a spring. Pretty simple. Now let's explore these oil passages. And to repeat myself, I took this screw out of here. So remember, they had to drill this, but with this pipe cleaner here, you can see, or can you? Let's have a little light on the subject. When you look in there, you can see the pipe cleaner. Maybe you can't see it, but there's the pipe cleaner through that hole. And then pushing it in even farther, you will see that that hole goes all the way inside the barrel here. And you can see the tip of the pipe cleaner. Although now it's oily and black, I'm not sure you can see it, but that goes all the way through. Now never mind that big hole in the center. That's not a hole. That was just what's left of them drilling the casting. It's the smaller hole there that is the oil passage. With the aid of some wires here, I've attempted to show you the path that the oil follows through the various hidden oil passages. So with a piece of piano wire here, stuck into the bottom hole here, which I showed you, where the oil is forced into this cylinder, you can see here, I hope, that that is a through hole. And for now, I put this plug in here just to remind you that there's no oil coming out of here. That's just to stop the oil. And then with this pipe cleaner here, I'm attempting to show you that little side hole in here, I hope I've shown you that. There's a little side hole in this hole that connects with this, and that's low pressure now. That's low pressure. This other one is high pressure. And then also where I've used a copper wire here, and the valve here, I took the valve and the ball out, but that passage is connected with this hole. So it'll give you a little idea now where the oil is going, and again, that's to allow the oil, in this case, to return back into the reservoir.